Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we are looking at the SH Figuarts Dragon Ball Z Majin Buu figure, which is one that so many people have been so excited about. I know it's not Super Buu, but it is a step in the right direction. It's still a pink guy with white pants. I mean, that's pretty close. And anyway, Boo's kind of awesome, so why not get a figure of him? He's going to definitely look cool on the display shelf. This figure actually does quite a few things better than I expected it was going to, and unfortunately the opposite of that is true as well. Some things that are really not very good about this figure at all. So let's go ahead and get it off the stand and take a closer look. This guy stands to the top of his head about 7¼ inches. If you want to count the tentacle antenna thingy, he's closer to 8. So that definitely does add a little bit of height, but I don't know if you want to count that. So that's why I gave you both. And then that makes him about 18 centimeters, and that top piece will take him up to closer to 20. And if you're curious about how he scales against, let's say, the newest Goku figure, there you go. Buu is quite large. He's a very big boy. In just about in every way, except for weight. He's mostly hollow, which I think is good, because otherwise he would have just been super heavy. Aesthetically speaking, they pretty much nailed this figure. It does have shading throughout the white, not much, but it does have a little bit. And then the paintwork for the gold and black up here, very, very clean. Of course, the faces are clean. Unfortunately, there's no shading on any of the pink, which is not necessarily a big deal, I don't think. We do have just a tiny bit of purple shading. We have some up here at the knot. You can see it most noticeably there. I think there's a little bit up here and maybe some back here, but it's super, super faint, so it's very, very difficult to see. It looks more like just shadows being cast, but there is some noticeable shading on the purple knot right there. So I guess that's better than nothing. I do really like the fact that it has a matte or satin finish everywhere, especially the pink. It's not glossy at all. You get a little bit of the metallic with like kind of a satin finish for the gold. The white's not glossy, the yellow's not, everything looks really good. I'm pleased with it. The glossiest thing on here, which isn't still very glossy, is the cape. And I don't mind that some parts are, so I think that's all right. Pretty pleased with it. As far as accessories go, we have 3 different heads. We have the neutral head that comes on him in the package, one where he's angry and smirking, and then one where he's got his tongue sticking out, and they all look really good. I know some people are saying there should be more heads. You know, it would be nice, but I think should's a strong word. Could is probably better. We have a few different hands. We have the 2 fist hands, and then we have the 2 pointing finger hands and 2 gripping hands. And then lastly, we have his chocolate bar, which is actually surprisingly well done. And then I guess technically you can count the cape as an accessory because you have to attach it. However, it's part of his body, kind of, so I wouldn't really include that. But let's go ahead and talk about it now. It's not good. It's not good at all. Unfortunately, the cape, you do have to peg in each piece, and so they do articulate individually, which you can do. And this is probably the best option. If you're going to move the cape, just lift them all up. If you're going to lift them up individually at all, it just doesn't really work. And yes, you can rotate them, but it's just not very much, and it's not very practical, so you can't really do anything with it. And they just separate. There's not really much overlap at all. It's just, overall, I think it's not necessary at all to have these separate pieces. I can't imagine anybody's really going to go through the effort of trying to figure out a way to pose this when they barely move. Like, yeah, you can bring them out to the side, but you can't bring this one with it. So you can't do anything with it. So it should have just been one solid piece, because it looks like crap compared to what it would have looked like if it was one solid piece. You don't really gain anything from the separate pieces or from the articulation. So to me, that's a big bummer. Luckily, if you just leave it down, you can't really tell from the front, so it's something you can ignore, but it's definitely not, like, there's no reason for that, unless they just wanted to use smaller molds. Instead of making one big mold, 3 smaller ones is easier, I guess, potentially, but that's, effectively, it's a bummer. As far as the head goes, I'll just show you. We have a ball peg for the neck. The whole neck can move around. And then we have a hinge and a ball peg in here. Can that hinge rotate? I don't think it can. I've been trying to get it to rotate, and I can't get it to rotate. Maybe mine's just stuck. Hey, there we go. We got it. Okay, so it does rotate in the neck. But it's going to be very difficult to do. You definitely have to pop the head off to do it. So it should just be a double ball peg, honestly. There's no benefit to this. There's no benefit to this at all as opposed to a double ball peg, which is almost true for every single Dragon Ball figure they've made. You're going to do almost all of your posing on that top ball peg, and if it had a second ball peg underneath it instead of that hinge and swivel, it'd be a lot easier. Not that you can't get your head poses done, but it would be a lot easier and more effective if you had a double ball peg. So, it's okay. For the shoulders, we have a butterfly joint that works well enough. It's a little gappy in there. I think it could have been handled a little bit better, maybe. But the biggest thing about this is the socket part, where the shoulder actually connects to the butterfly joint, is hollow. That shouldn't be. That's an outward-facing piece. That should be filled in. Those gaps in there don't need to be there. They're only there to save plastic. They really shouldn't be there at all. You should not be able to see into that butterfly joint. The gap back here is understandable, though I do think it could have been handled a little better. But this gapping in here is just not okay. That should not be there. You do have your ball peg that connects to that, so you get to move the arm around on that a little bit. And the butterfly joint does help a little bit. You can bring the arm a little bit more straight forward because of it. How much more? Well, let's see. Barely. It's really not that helpful, and it's kind of ugly, so that's a bit of a bummer. You do have your bicep swivel. Double jointed elbow gives you a little bit better than 90 degrees. That could be a little bit better too. We have ball pegs for the wrists. Big ball pegs for the wrists, but I think it's good enough. You can pose them pretty well. If you go too far, you get some gapping, but that's to be expected. For the torso, it's just a ball peg, but it doesn't work as well as I would have hoped. You can get decent leaning forward and back. You can tuck him. That's him leaning forward. So, I mean, as you can see, it's not very far. When you lean him back, you can lean him back a little bit, and then you do actually get some shading in there, which is kind of nice, but it's still very, very minimal range. I mean, that's leaning back and then leaning forward. So it's pretty lightweight articulation, and then side to side is almost non-existent. You really don't get anything there at all. And then rotation, again, almost nothing. And you have to be extra, extra careful because this is painted black, and if you rub the pink against the black, as you can see, I have a little bit right there, and it may not show up. I've already got some smudging going on, so it's kind of a problem. I do like that there's some shading on there and that you do have some posability, but I think they could have done a little bit better with the torso. I mean, it doesn't come down far enough that it's really going to impede the hips at all, so I think they could have done a little bit better. It's okay, but it definitely could use a little bit more range. Now for the hips, on the other hand, they did it just about as well as you could do it. You can bring the legs all the way forward. There's just a swivel at the crotch that lets the leg go forward and back. Then there's a hinge that lets it go out to the side. And you can work them at the same time. So yeah, there's, this gapping in here probably could have been handled a little bit better, but it's still functional. It's just fine, no issues there. You can rotate the leg at the thigh swivel where the pants meet the black part of the legs. You have a single jointed knee that gives you 90 degrees, but you couldn't do more than that anyway, so that's fine. And then you have your ball peg for your ankle, which is awful. It might be a double. Looks like a single, honestly. But you have like no range in the ankle at all. None side to side virtually. Almost none forward and back. And then you have a toe hinge. So the ankles are terrible. The knees are fine, the hips are fine, the torso's terrible. Shoulders are ugly but functional. And the arms are okay, and the head's okay. The cape is terrible. So, I mean, it's funny to me because the things that should have been a problem aren't at all on this guy, and then the things that should be no problem at all are. It's still a good figure, and it still looks cool, and I think most people are going to be happy to have it, but it just really bugs me that something like the torso is the issue on this, and the cape. Two things that didn't have to be an issue at all. It could have been so much better with just those tiny things being adjusted. The hips, look at those big fat hips, should have been a problem, or at least had the most chance of being a problem, but instead they're fine. I don't know. I don't get it. I like it. I'm going to recommend it, but I don't know what they were thinking when they decided to make the ankles so absolutely terrible and the torso and then the cape. So there it is. Get it, but now you know there are some issues, so you have to watch out for that. Thanks for watching, guys. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I have new videos up almost every single day. We talk about action figures, movies, TV shows, video games, all kinds of fun stuff, so make sure you come back for that. And in the meantime, keep collecting.